Carlton King, former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, but actually majors in on geopolitics. Now, yes, last week, or in fact for the last 2 weeks, I've been without my partner in crime, the lovely Firgas Esack, who looks at things from a different perspective, from the perspective of that of the media, who I believe actually control what a vast majority of the people think. Now, I'm going to say, before Fergus says it, when I talk media, I mean the whole kit and caboodle. I don't care whether it's TikTok, social media, or the more controlled press, television, radio. It's this tsunami, if you will, of information, often information that might well be questionable or be directed. And the reason why I say that, putting in mind over this last week, we've had the great Gary Lineker and him basically making a simple statement that language is important, and was then nearly drummed out of the BBC when an individual actually running, and I know what the argument has been up to now, that he isn't a director of the BBC, but is a non-executive of the BBC, but still a non-executive director, the head honcho, was able to get an £800,000 loan for our Prime Minister, then somehow be selected by that Prime Minister, and had also given previously 400,000 to the Tory party as a donor. Now, how does that sit with impartiality when another guy who is a football pundit basically says, this is what I think on Twitter? You know, I asked that question. So Fergus, please come in on it.
Start. First of all, God, 2 weeks on your own. Did you miss me?
I absolutely missed you. I can't function without you.
But poor old Gary Lineker, though, like, you know, you kind of feel for him because at the end of the day, and actually at the end of the day is probably what he should have said, right? Because he's a football pundit. At the end of the day, you know, it's not like he was kind of trying to shoehorn this into commentary. Like, he was saying this on his own. You know, his crime really was talking like an adult instead of talking like a commentator.
Absolutely.
You know, he was making an intelligent and valid point outside of the remit of, you know, discussing the post-match analysis of, you know, Liverpool versus Man United or whatever.
No, I am a football fan. I'm going to put my hands up in the air. I could have been a professional, right? So I'm putting my hands up in it when there was no money in it. I should add, back in the early 70s. But the point is this guy had been on the BBC and had said on the BBC, on the football programme, for the greatest sports event in the world. It's arguable because some will say it's the Olympics, but I'm going to say it's the World Cup. He had been saying loud and clear about Qatar. and that people should question the Qataris, etc., etc., etc. So he had been saying that, and the BBC, guess what? Didn't say one iota. They were absolutely happy with his statements. But the moment he brings that question home and says, hey, look at what's been said and done, then all of a sudden, oh, you're impartial, my friend. You can't say things like that. Well, hang on. Should he not have been impartial on Qatar then?
I know, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's like it almost begs the question, like, would it have been worse if he was standing up for the Nazis? You know,
I suggest nobody to say anything.
Anyway, this good segue, good intro.
It is, isn't it? It is, because it comes into what you want to say. You just told me what you want to go on now.
That comes into what I want to say, because God, we've got to talk about Matt Hancock, haven't we? We've got to do it.
We do. We have to talk about Matt Hancock.
Matt Hancock, like the king of 100,000 WhatsApp messages.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this is, you know, we have to talk about it, but it's escalated into such a car crash, really, hasn't it?
For me, I want to get your feelings on Isabel Oakeshott, because I'm guessing you know her.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting? I mean, I remember, gosh, I was listening to something on Radio 4 on Friday, and Anushka Astana, who's the deputy political editor for ITV, was on there, right? And she said when all the, you know, she remembers when all of this came through as breaking news, and she was there was a point in the newsroom where they were kind of going, is he actually in on this? Like, is he so much of a, you know,
self-publicist? Yeah.
So much of a self-publicist that he actually wants this to go through because he thinks there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Yeah. By the way, is that true? Is it true that there is no such thing as bad publicity?
Well, I think this is pretty damning publicity, unless, I mean, apart from for WhatsApp, I mean, it's pretty good publicity for WhatsApp, isn't it?
I diverse a little bit, but I just wanted to, that saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity, has been around for what, 100 years, 50 years, right? Is it the case, though, that all of a sudden, with no platforming, that has now spun over to there is a problem with bad publicity, whereas before there was never a problem with bad publicity? Is there kind of, has a difference occurred? Has something else occurred?
Oh, you see, I think there is such a thing as bad publicity, and I would always stand by that.
Right. So was there always bad publicity then?
Yeah. You know, I mean, reputation. You know, in the landscape of PR, reputation management is one thing, and you know, and headlines is another thing. So yeah, I mean, there's always bad publicity.
So what's with these two guys in Romania then? Because they live off bad publicity. That's how they have made the literal hundreds. Is it hundreds? Let's not over the top. Okay, let's say tens of millions off bad publicity. That's what they've made it from.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Well. I mean, okay. I'll say there are definitions of the term, true. What you're looking at is headlines and column inches. What I'm looking at, and you know, what we look at on a daily basis at DABS is key messaging and you know, keywords and sort of key associations and competitor analysis and stuff like that, all of which, you know, builds people's brand or personal brand or whatever, you know. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, which I'm sure you're just interesting. I can narrate for your listeners at on another occasion, or they can tweet me or DM me or whatever, and you know, have a chat about it. But okay, so for starters, God, it's like, is it not even taking yourself back to just being a person on the street, right?
Yep.
It's not astounding how many high-level governmental decisions take place on WhatsApp.
No, it isn't. Right, and I'll tell you why. And this is absolutely truthful. Okay, so in the branch, when I was in special branch, when it existed, there were many different elements to the role. So national security, secret intelligence, blah, blah, blah. They were looking at extremism, looking at individuals who may want to do the country harm outside of homegrown extremism. So let's say intelligence officers from other countries, etc., etc. Right. So within that, what you should be doing is looking at what are the potentials for problems like signals intelligence. So the job of that obviously is GCHQ, but I'd be working with the most senior of government ministers, i.e. Prime Minister, right downwards, yeah, and they'd be using the normal mobile phone. And you say, Prime Minister, or Foreign Secretary, or Home Secretary, or whatever, so I'm not giving any, whatever, that phone may well be compromised, yeah, and you're using that phone talking about normal things that maybe have a problem with them, right? So, for me, half of these people in politics think nothing of security. So I could see, and I've left, and the WhatsApp era is with us. I could foresee that they'd think, yeah, let's use this WhatsApp. Number one, it's secure because it is basically encrypted, yeah, end to end. Now, for me, I would imagine that the National Security Agency of the United States probably has already broken that encryption. Don't know, I'm just guessing. But I would probably that would be the case. That's the first thing. But secondly, I would have thought that also keeping the messages is the problem. So you've got the messages and they've gone through, but keeping them then on your phone is another level of vulnerability. Now, this is what is important though. What they are absolutely adept at and thinking and focused to is that when you write on files or certain things are written down on files for them, be they electronic or paper, the problem for them is that then holds them to a specific thing that they may have said on day, date, time and place. Politicians don't want that. They always want plausible deniability. They always want a way out of something. Always. Oh, I won't get out of this, so I never said it. So they can always say, I don't recall, I never said that. Right? So that's what they want. So, they used to put post-it notes on things or whatever it might be that you could get rid of, right? That it doesn't come into the actual filing system. So I can see when they think, we got this thing, WhatsApp, that we can knock stuff out on, talk to each other, and it's not going through the regular system, so nobody will ever know. And this is what, if you think back, Hillary Clinton had a problem with. She's doing it on her own servers rather than governmental servers. People misunderstood what that meant. What that meant is her information she was putting down on her emails weren't going into the government system. Therefore, nobody could ever see what was actually being said. Right? So this is what they like, politicians. Many politicians are duplicitous.
I've always thought spies used invisible ink.
Yeah, absolutely, they did, and potentially still do. No, this is real. Potentially still do, but in different ways. What I'm saying is, it's the same game, but for them, they're not spies. They're not thinking that way. But all they're thinking of is what will come back to haunt me. So if I can put something down that doesn't come back to haunt me, great. Now the problem is when you get a fella who clearly isn't 100% bright, and then thinks, I'll give it to this journalist. I mean, come on. And I'll let this journalist write me a book for me because I'm too lazy to write it myself. Or, she can write it better than I can. Let's give him that due. And I'll let her have access to all my WhatsApp things on my phone. Yeah. Because she's not going to say anything, is she? That's where you get your problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's complete madness, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's like, it's absolute madness. But even before we talk about Isabel Oakeshott, I mean, to your original point about the messages and the trail and whatever, and let's talk about this in a minute because of the end-to-end encryption. But for example, famously in the Wagatha Christie case, she kind of said, she sort of had to say, I've dropped my phone in the sea in order to get rid of those WhatsApp messages.
Yeah.
But
Well, do you actually? Because let me come back in very quickly because you asked. Do you? Because the company is a private company that sits in the United States. Now, obviously, people can ask for that private company to give up its data, right? And if they sit in the US and they go through the FISA courts, it's a special court that they go to, and the FISA court can dictate and say, we want that information. I think from what I hear or have heard with WhatsApp, they say on your bike, I'm not giving it. I think WhatsApp is actually quite strong. Now, I don't know what it does with the FISA court because that's all secretive. So when they do that in the States with the FISA court, do they actually give up the information? They may well do. But as a general rule, WhatsApp actually keeps its stuff very close to its chest. So the weak point, other than the NSA actually funneling in and finding a way through into it, a backdoor, which I think they will have. But other than that, I think the weak point is people keeping the messages on their phones. And this is what I don't understand your man for.
But also, I mean, okay, so look, as your listeners will know, I'm a mum, and you know, I know you're a big fan of WhatsApp, but for me, in the early days, what it represented was just hundreds of mums connecting in mums groups to talk about how little Lucas has forgotten his swimming kit this morning, or you know, anything else, because they're all sort of bored. And actually, when you're trying to work in a working day and you've got, you know, 4 children, and so you're on like 4 different mums groups and they've all got 30 parents on there, and as soon as there's a chat that starts and suddenly your phone's just pinging off like a, you know, like you know what I mean? And all like my first reaction to looking at those 100,000 WhatsApp messages was just the sheer volume of the you know, the amount of people that were actually on those groups. Like Matt Hancock's phone must have just been like beeping like mad all day, you know. And
you know, I like to see both sides. I'm like Gary Lineker, and I like to see both sides. You know, I like Gary. No, be realistic. What might, I'll give him a little bit of due on here. What may have happened is this was in the time of COVID where they weren't meeting face en face, right, face to face. So therefore, maybe it was easier to make the connection just over WhatsApp. That's the only other thing I'd say.
But 100,000 messages is a pretty punchy number over 2 years, isn't it?
It's incredible, mate. It's incredible, mate. It is.
You know, so there's a part of my brain that thinks, gosh, you know, even that alone would send me insane. But secondly, when you look at the people that were on that chat outside of the government, I mean, you know, we'll talk about the government, you know, and let's address Mr. Hancock as well. But outside of that, you know, he was WhatsApping George Osborne and saying, you know, hey mate, you know, like struggling to communicate this message with the nation, and he was going, hey, no problem, I'll put it in the Evening Standard tomorrow. And has
that not always gone on? I ask you.
Yeah, it has. But I mean, like the fact that, you know, the question that we don't know. I mean, obviously we've got the, you know, we've got all this sort of jaw-dropping evidence, but the thing that we don't know is how many people were on the same group. Like, was everybody on the same group chat, or were these all individual chats, right? Because my point is, you know, I mean, Dominic Cummings already said that, you know, famously said that Boris used to call the Telegraph his boss. He used to say the Telegraph newspaper was his first boss.
Yeah. I'm hearing it.
So if arguably the Telegraph and the Standard were already on that same WhatsApp group anyway.
Right, now, I'm going to hit this on two angles. I'm going to hit this with 2 angles. Fantastic, you brought it in. Dominic Cummings ran the government. You know that. Absolutely. He actually said, and I couldn't believe it, he actually said on the interview with Koonsberg that when the Prime Minister won his snap, Johnson I'm talking about, won his snap election where they got a fantastic number of MPs through, and he was the king of the world, blah, blah, blah. Well, the king of Great Britain anyway. He he basically contacted Dominic Cummings and said to him, I need you back, Dom. I need you running it, helping me through the game. And Dominic Cummings said, and I'm sort of paraphrasing it, I'll only come to run your cabinet on the same level that I ran Vote Leave, which is you politicians, this is what he said, you politicians, keep your nose out of it. I'll run it and I'll just tell you what to say. And she said, what? Come on, love it. He said, yeah. He said, I knew he'd say yes because he don't know what he's talking about and he don't know anything about running a country. Right? This is what he said. We're still, and this is the one that really got me. Sorry, no, that was originally when he originally took power. When they had then the elections and he got a fantastic majority, Dominic Cummings said, I knew we were out. And what he means by that is him and the communications guy he had and various others. And he said, so it was either us or him. Because she, meaning the Prime Minister's wife now, Johnson's wife now, Carrie, she hated us and she had got a clause into him and she would say, get rid of him. So we knew, because he's now got this massive majority, that we had to get rid of him. So Koonsberg said, and again, I'm paraphrasing because I'm not 100% on, but it's around about right. Koonsberg, so you're saying to me a couple of months after the Prime Minister got an election that got him the highest majority since nigh on Margaret Thatcher, you're telling me that you and some others, he said, I don't know who the others are. He said, well, I could tell you, but I'm not going to tell you fully. He said, you and some others decided to get rid of him, right? And he said, who said anything about a couple of months? You're not listening. It was the night of the election. So what he's saying is, the night of the election, he's committing a coup. That's effectively a coup to get rid of the Prime Minister because it was him or us. I mean, can you believe that? I mean, this is just incredible stuff. And that was said on national television and nothing happened. Oh, nobody's covering it in the papers. Nobody's covering it. Nobody's saying anything about it. It's just a bit of television that nobody bothered with. When this guy's saying, I committed a coup, or attempted to oust the elected Prime Minister on the day of the election, the night of the election, when he realised he got all the power he needed. I mean, this is just incredible stuff.
Yeah,
this is not even Banana Republic stuff.
Even more incredulous was the expletives on the WhatsApp chat that Matt Hancock referred to Dominic Cummings with.
Absolutely. I mean, this guy was running riot there. Running riot. Everybody fine of him. You know, I saw this years before and I was kind of not happy with it. I remember speaking to some politician about it because there's some good ones. Few and far between, but good ones. I remember saying, listen, what's happening here? You're getting rid of or not listening to career diplomats in the civil service and the foreign office who've gone through their life weighing up what's good for the nation. And what you've done is you brought in a whole load of special advisors, yeah, who've just come out of university, who don't have a clue, and by the way, may also not have Britain's best interests at heart, because you don't know half of these specialist advisors came from anyhow, right? And you're listening to these people rather than the folk who at least generally do have Britain's interest at heart, and they're deciding what policies are going on. I mean, it's just incredible stuff. And Cummings is a prime example of that.
Yeah, but you kind of, you know, when you, now that obviously we've got sight of all this banter and we've kind of created our own little personas for all of these politicians, you know, and you know, when you look at the game playing that Cummings was doing versus, you know, some of these Hancock WhatsApp messages where he's, you know, for example, the care homes one where he's just in capital letters saying he wants to hit his target, like screw how it's done, he just wants to hit his target, and he's so like he's so fixated on that. He's not thinking about how to take over the government or how to rule the world or how to play at the British public or how
just how to kill 30,000 people. That's all
he's just personally thinking about how to get his bonus for hitting his target.
Just how to kill 30,000 people. Now, this is a serious point, because one of the things Dominic Cummings showed and you may well recall it. And I, at one time, and I always kind of bring it back to my own experience, so I kind of know what I'm talking about. I ran a thing called the Strategic Analysis Unit in the NPOIU, which is the National Public Order Intelligence Unit. It was at the time. Now it's called Domestic Extremism. It's a national body. So it's England, Wales, Scotland, and abnormally Northern Ireland. Okay, when it was nuclear and stuff like that. And my job there, in fact, I started the unit, the SAU, Strategic Analysis Unit, was basically to write papers that would look at what may cause a threat to the United Kingdom 2 to 5 years. That's what I was looking at the time. And it could be anything from foot and mouth to, I don't know, extremism, right, to animal rights, to whatever, right? So I would look at that, and I had a team of guys and gals underneath me. Guys, in fact, they were all guys underneath me. And I'd say, we're going to write on this issue. That's what we're going to write on. And I dole out the jobs, boom, 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 boom. Speak to academics, speak to this, speak to that, speak to the other, speak to focus groups. I had a focus group that I could go to because an ex-colleague of mine, when I was in the service in MI6 SIS, he started running a focus group for government in the Cabinet Office. So I would give him the police security, the thing called security service bodies, which are basically within each police force. In many of them, you've got people that are looking at what's going on. And so they would bring together information and that sort of stuff, which politicians like. So I could give him that feed for Whitehall. And what I wanted from them was their focus grouping, which they did because they were massively into focus grouping. And then, I could put all this together because obviously I had all that info and put it all together throughout. And then we could write papers with academia, etc., military, whomever, services, and bring them all together and write papers that would give us a heads up for where we could go in the future and what might happen. Right. So that's putting all that together. So when he was whiteboarding, which is what we call that, whiteboarding, crystal balling, he wrote a thing and he said on it, and I'll never forget it because I saw it written down there, who do we allow to die? Right? That's what was written on that board when it showed it. Who do we allow to die? Now, what I can't say is, I cannot say that they made a decision who they allowed to die. But what I will say is this. What they knew at the time is the example, the Northern Italian Health Service, okay, was struggling with COVID because the elderly were taken ill and they were putting them all into major resuscitation units. And that was blocking the beds. So it was absolutely struggling. Now, the Germans, I think the Swiss, but particularly the Germans said, listen, we've got people not dying. We'll take a lot of your patients. So the Germans actually took a lot of these elderly patients in the original first element. But that's what was happening. And so their service became overrun, as did the Spanish service, health service to start off with elderly people. So what clearly, I think, and this is only my imagination, my suggestion, when I see that on the board, who do we allow to die, is they think to themselves, well, if we don't put elderly people into these major resuscitation areas, right, these critical beds, then, of course, we won't be overrun. Right? It's not rocket science. Don't put them in, we won't be overrun. Now, how do we not put them in? Well, don't test them. Simplest way ever. Just don't test them. Send them back to care homes untested. Why not? Why wouldn't you? Yeah. So this is how I think potentially. I'm not saying anybody's saying that. I'm just saying I could see how that, from looking at that whiteboard, how that perspective could be pushed forward. Now that whiteboard was put on television, and companies was talking about what he was doing, blah blah blah, and how he could deal with it, whether they're going for herd immunity, etc., etc. Right in the beginning, as you know. They built these Nightingale hospitals trying to copy the Chinese who were building a hospital in a day. Well, the Chinese military has basically hundreds of thousands of medics in it. It's not a problem for it. It can build a hospital and then have medics run it. Our system was we could build all these Nightingale hospitals, but we got nobody to run them. So the capacity was not in the bed spaces. The capacity was in the medics to carry out the actions. Half of them had gone back to wherever they came from because we left the European Union, and half of them thought, well, I'm going home. So there was a deficit on medics anyway, nurses, doctors, etc. And now we've got this pandemic, and we don't have people to run them. Right? So I could see how that was put forward, and as a result, as you know, it said at least 20 to 30,000 more people died in Britain, elderly people, than was necessary. Okay, so what I'm saying is these actions have consequences. I mean, my mother got COVID and was put into a place, an old people's home, and she picked the COVID up from the old people in the old people's home. Luckily, she survived it. So these are real things, real. It's not pretend, it's real.
So that was part 1 of this week's Black Spy podcast. And hope you enjoyed it. We'll have part 2 next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.